The Wicked Wolverine. One day, Wolverine was out walking on a hillside when, on turning a corner, he suddenly saw a large rock. "Was that you I heard talking just now?" he asked, for Wolverines are curious animals and always like to know the reasons for things. "No, certainly not," answered the rock. "I don't know how to walk." "But I saw you walking," continued the Wolverine. "I am afraid you were not taught to speak the truth," retorted the rock. "I need not speak like that. I've seen you walking," replied the Wolverine, "though I'm quite sure that you could never match me." Then he ran a little distance and stopped to see if the rock was pursuing him. But to his vexation, the rock was still at the same place. Then the Wolverine went up close and struck the rock a blow with his paw, saying, "Well, will you catch me now?" "I can't walk, but I can roll," answered the rock. The Wolverine laughed and said, "Oh, well, that will do just as well," and began to run down the side of the mountain. At first, he went quite slowly, just to give the rock a chance, he thought to himself. But soon he quickened his pace, for he found that the rock was almost at his heels. But the faster the Wolverine ran, the faster the rock rolled, and by the little creature began to get very tired, and was sorry he had not left the rock to itself. Thinking that it could not manage to put a spurt, he could reach the forest of great trees at the bottom of the mountain, where the rock could not come. He gathered up all his strength, and instead of running, he leaped over sticks and stones. But whatever he did, the rock was always close behind him. At length he grew so weary that he could not even see where he was going, and catching his foot in a branch, he tripped and fell. The rock stopped at once, but there came a shriek from the Wolverine. "Get off! Get off! Can't you see that you're on my legs?" "Why did you not leave me alone?" asked the rock. "I did not want to move. I hate moving. But you would have it, and certainly shan't move now till I am forced to." I will call my brothers," answered the Wolverine. "There are many of them in the forest, and you will soon see that they are stronger than you." And he called, and called, and called, till wolves and foxes and all sorts of creatures came running to see what was the matter. "How did he get under that rock?" they asked, making a ring around him. But they had to repeat the question several times before the Wolverine would answer, for he, like many other persons, found it hard to confess that he brought his troubles on himself. "Well, I was dull and wanted to play with someone," he said at last in a sulky voice, "and I challenged the rock to catch me. Of course, I thought I could run the fastest, but I tripped and it rolled on me. It was just an accident." "It serves you for being so silly," they said, and they pushed and hauled the rock for a long time without making it move an inch. "You're no good at all," cried the Wolverine crossly, for it was suffering in great pain. "If you cannot get me free, I shall see what my friends the lightning and thunder can do." And he called loudly to the lightning to come and help him as quickly as possible. In a few minutes, a dark cloud came rolling up in the sky, giving out such terrific claps of thunder that the wolves and foxes and all the other creatures ran helter-skelter in all directions. But frightened though they were, they did not forget to beg the lightning to take off the Wolverine's coat and free his legs, but to be careful not to hurt him. So the lightning disappeared into a cloud for a moment to gather up fresh strength, then came rushing down right upon the rock, which sent it flying in all directions, and took the Wolverine's coat so neatly that it was torn into tiny shreds. The Wolverine himself was quite unharmed. "That was rather clumsy of you," said he, standing up naked in his flesh. "Surely you could have split the rock without tearing my coat to bits." And he stooped down to pick up the pieces. It took him a long time, for there were a great many of them, but at last he had them all in his hand. "I'll go to my sister the frog," he thought to himself, "and she will sew them together for me." and he set off at once for the swamp in which his sister lived. "Will you sew my coat together? I had an unlucky accident that is quite impossible to wear," he said when he found her. "With pleasure," she said, for she had always been taught to be polite, and getting her needle and thread, she began to fit the pieces. But though she was very good-natured, she was not very clever, and she got some of the bits wrong. When the Wolverine, who was very particular about his clothes, came to put it on, he grew very angry. "What a useless creature you are!" he cried. "Do you expect me to go about in such a coat as this? Why, it bulges down the back as if I had a hump. It is so tight across the chest that I expect to burst every time I breathe. I knew you were stupid, but I did not think you were that stupid." Giving the poor frog a blow on her head, which knocked her straight into the water, he walked off in a rage to his younger sister, the mouse. "I tore my coat this morning," he began, when he had found her sitting at the door of her house, eating an apple. "It was all in little bits, and I took it to our sister Frog to ask her to sew it for me. But just look at what she has done with it. We'll have to take it to pieces and fit them together properly, and I hope I shall not have to complain again." For as the Wolverine was older than the mouse, he was accustomed to speak to her in this manner. However, the mouse was used to it, and only answered, "I think you had better stay here till it is done, and if there's any alteration needed, I can make it." So the Wolverine sat down on a heap of dry ferns, and picking up an apple, he finished it without even asking the mouse's leave. At last the coat was ready, and the Wolverine put it on. "Yes, it fits very well," he said. "You have sewn it very neatly. When I pass this way again, I will bring you a handful of corn as a reward." And he ran off as smart as ever, leaving the mouse quite grateful behind him. He wandered about for many days, till he reached a place where food was very scarce. For a whole week he went without any. He was growing desperate when he suddenly came upon a bear that was lying asleep. "Ah, here is food at last," he thought. But how was he to kill the bear, who was so much bigger than himself? There was no use to try to invent some cunning plan which would get her into his power. At last, after thinking hard, he decided upon something, and going up to the bear, he exclaimed, "Is that you, my sister?" The bear turned around and saw the Wolverine, and, murmuring to herself so low that nobody could hear, "I never heard before that I had a brother," got up and ran quickly up a tree, up which she climbed. Now the Wolverine was very angry when he saw his dinner vanishing in front of him, especially as he could not climb the tree like a bear. So he followed and stood at the foot of the tree, shrieking as loud as he could. "Come down, sister! Her father has sent us to look for you. You were lost when you were a little girl and went out picking berries, and when it was only the other day that we heard from a beaver that you were here." At these words, the bear came a little way down the tree, and the Wolverine, seeing this, went on. "Are you not fond of berries? I am, and I know a place where they grow so thick the ground is quite hidden. Why, look for yourself. That hillside is quite red with them." "I can't see far," answered the bear, now climbing down altogether. "You must have wonderfully good eyes. I wish I had, but my sight is very short." "So is mine till father smashed a pail full of cranberries and rubbed them in my eyes," replied the Wolverine. "But if you'd like to go and gather some berries, I will do just as he did, and soon you will be able to see as far as me." It took the bear a long while to gather the berries, for she was slow about everything. Besides, it made her back ache to stoop. But as soon as she returned with a sackful and put them down beside the Wolverine, "That is splendid, sister," replied the Wolverine. "Now lay flat on the ground with your head on this stone, while I smash them." The bear, who was very tired, was only too glad to do as she was bid, and stretch herself comfortably on the grass. "I am ready now," said the Wolverine after a bit. "Just at first you will find that the berries make your eyes smart, but you must be careful not to move, or the juice will run out, and then it will have to be done all over again." So the bear promised to lie very still. But the moment the cranberries touched her eyes, she sprang up with a roar. "Oh, you mustn't mind a little pain," said the Wolverine. "It will soon be over, and then you will see all sorts of things you've never dreamt of." The bear sank down with a groan, and as her eyes were full of cranberry juice, which completely blinded her, the Wolverine took up a sharp knife and stabbed her in the heart. Then he took off her skin, and stealing some fire from a tent, which his sharp eyes perceived hid behind a rock, he set about roasting the bear a bit by bit. He thought the meat was the best he had ever tasted, and when dinner was done he made up his mind to try that same trick again, if he was ever hungry. And very likely he did.